that says, do you want to go further or do you want to go back? And my answer was immediate: I don't want to die. And as soon as I said that, I was back in my body, not fully conscious, just opening my eyes, noticing that it was like slow and then it got really intense, the pain in my body. I got slammed back into my body and I couldn't breathe and I couldn't, I had to like effort myself to breathe. I could feel the pain. I mean, it just stabbing electrical, muscular pain, and I just couldn't move.
Today, I'd like to welcome back to the show Tyler Deal. Tyler, welcome back. How is Hawaii treating you?
Hawaii's great. Thank you so much. I'm always so blessed to be here. Every day I wake up and um, it's just a beautiful area where we live. And yeah, thank you for asking.
I so love Hawaii. So, I've had you on the show. Originally, I had reached out to you and I wanted to talk to you about your NDE, but at the time, you weren't sharing your story anymore. So we talked about other stuff and we talked about the book that you wrote, but today we're going to talk about your near-death experience. And I'm so excited because I've actually heard your story several times, but I've never actually talked to you about it. So today I'm going to pick your brain and let my curiosity run wild. So with that being said, are you ready?
I'm ready, as ready as I can be, always.
Awesome. So, all
Yeah,
right. So, let's just start with whatever you want to share leading up to your NDE and the near death experience itself.
sure. Yeah. So leading up to it really goes back to my childhood because um, I'm just an emotional person, meaning that I have a lot of emotions running through me all the time, and I have since I was a kid. Um, Being sensitive and thinking and believing, growing up in a household where um, that wasn't so encouraged by my father, but it was more so by my mother. So I had a conflicting energy within me. Just as a kid, you don't really know. Um, you think if you feel a certain way, then it's bad. And so leading up to it, I was very sensitive. We grew up, well, the first 4 years of my life in Northern California, in the southern part of the Bay Area, and we lived on an orchard. It's like an acre, and that was a very. I remember that clearly. I remember even as far back as 1 or 2 years old, and I remember how happy I was there, particularly being in nature and connecting to the trees. We had an oak tree that I used to talk to. Um, I felt very connected to the orchard. We had plums and pomegranates and peaches and all kinds of fruit growing. And so it was a magical experience, as many kids have. Their eyes are open to the magic that's all around them, and that was the case for me. I mean, I could see fairies. I could connect to the nature spirits. I could feel their presence. Um, it was great. And then when I was 4, almost 5 years old, we my father decided to move his company to Washington State, which is just 2 states up on the west coast of the U.S. And and I didn't know about it. I was just kind of thrown into, this is what's happening. We're moving, and I was just like, whoa, like I'm leaving. That connection is what I felt. So yeah, so then it became difficult. Growing up, it was a lot of stress for everybody. My mom, she had to go. My We were building a house, and she had to go to the property every day. So I'd come back from school, and then I'd follow her. We go to the property as the house was being built. My dad was at work, sometimes traveling for a whole week out of the country, and so there was a lot of pressure, and I just felt I didn't feel connected to myself anymore. I was a kid that didn't know how to deal with his emotions and how to deal with a family that was under a lot of stress. And I saw it both in my parents and my sister as well. So I shut off that part of me, that magical part of me, and and I became slowly depressed, I think. There continued to be abuse in the household, physical and verbal, and I didn't know how to deal with it really. And going into my teenage years, I think I was 11 years old, I started smoking cigarettes, and then I started drinking. And through my high school years, I was doing drugs like psychedelics and lots of marijuana and stuff like that. So that was my escape. And then when I was about 18 years old, it was my last year in high school. Um, that connection started to slowly come back. I would say that connection to what I felt, nature and God. I'll just go back a little bit, Chrissy. The as far as God was concerned, it didn't come from a traditional institutional religious background. My mom would go to Unity Church, and I always believed there was a presence that was higher than, or which connected us all in a way. And so I had kind of a faith in that. Like I didn't really know what else to believe in. So that was like that made sense to me. Well, if life sucks down here as a teenager or as a a young boy, then I have to have something. So that became kind of an underlying belief that there was something that could help me, and then also nature began to come back. So when I was 18, um, I I joined the track and I started to run in the woods. We did cross country, and I would go skiing in the mountains. We have these beautiful mountains right there, the Cascades, and I was like, oh, okay, this is this makes me actually feel good in my body.
So I'm curious
And then,
about
yeah,
that. You said that nature started to come back. Was that because
mm,
you started to spend more time in nature, or was that just something that started to come back? Was there something that set that off? I'm curious about that.
yeah, good question. I can't pinpoint a particular moment necessarily, but it was like it was almost like maybe it was skiing, maybe it was going into the forest, um, that I began to feel more comfortable again. There was a familiarity with myself. There was a familiarity of feeling at peace, and so I liked that. Um, it wasn't so much seeing fairies or talking to the trees, but it was more like, oh yeah, like I remember this. Like I can be in peace, in this place, as opposed to I would go every weekend. The contrast would be I'd go every weekend to Seattle and see live music in the late 80s and early 90s, and which was great. That was part of my experience. It was part of my experience, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't like me connecting to myself. So yeah, and then I had this initiation. It was at the time called futuring from my who would have become my spiritual teacher at the time. And then that really opened things up for me. Again, it started to open things up for me. So there was a duality happening within me. There was the contrast of still doing drugs, starting to feel really depressed, not knowing who I was. And then there was also um, that yearning, or that little trickle of experience of connecting to something more than just this material world.
Mhm.
So I had that initiation, and it just kind of it did blow me out of the water as far as feeling that I was incredibly sensitive again, like I was when I was a kid. But I didn't know quite what to do with that. And so I wanted to be with nature. And so I applied to one college. It was Humboldt State University, because I saw that they had all these redwood trees and the ocean was right there. And I was like, I don't, I didn't care about school. I just wanted to go be with those big trees. So that was the only school I applied to. And of course, that would, it was the only school that I was accepted into. And so yeah, so then that's, getting closer to my NDE. That's where I went. So I went there, and what happened to me really quickly was this. It was like, I don't know, there's no logic behind it. It was really just, I got really depressed very quickly, and I made some friends, and eventually I moved out of the dorms, and we all lived together. But it was really like, I was striving for that connection again, and I felt like a homesickness within me. It was like a homesickness, not so much that I wanted to go back to Washington, but it was this feeling within me that just felt disconnected, not knowing who I was, and I became very depressed.
Were
It
you
was a,
still like drinking and doing drugs at this point, or had that stopped?
Absolutely, yeah. I was still drinking a lot, drinking beer all the time,
Mhm.
um, um, smoking dope all the time. Humboldt was known notoriously for its, you know, choice marijuana.
I grew up in California,
So
and we had plenty
yeah,
of friends at Humboldt State. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and maybe that was part of the reason why I went down there too, but at the time, but I think it was more so like just knowing that I need to be closer to the elements. So, and I read recently too that, and the study was only done a few years ago, so I don't know how it was back in the 90s, but that 44% of college students who took a survey are depressed. They're really depressed. Um, but I felt alone. I felt like I was the only one. When you're in that space, you feel like you're the only one in the world. I'm assuming that's going through whatever it is. And of course, there's always somebody. I had the redwoods. I had an education, and there's people all over the world that are going through way worse. So, but we don't see that, or we don't feel that unless if we're going through our own stuff. And that's what I was doing.
And I just want to point out too, I mean, 44%, that is a huge statistic. That's like half of all college students are depressed.
Yeah.
And, I do believe it. I do believe it. And I know you said the study just came out a few years ago, but back in the 90s, we couldn't talk about our depression. We like the only choice we had when we felt something like that was to be alone in it, because it wasn't a thing that you could say and be accepted or even receive proper treatment for at the time. So it must have felt
Yeah.
even more lonely, I could imagine, than it would have felt now with so much awareness around it.
Right. I agree. And I don't even know what the protocols were back then. I don't know if people put you into a mental institution, or subscribed you Prozac. I think Prozac was probably still there back. I don't know.
I don't
And
either.
so I had no reference point, for what was coming up within me. I couldn't talk to other students. It's like other students probably felt like they couldn't talk. Guidance counselors, they were all about your path of education, right? So
Yeah.
at the time, so I felt alone. That's how I felt, and I felt like I was the only one experiencing it. The trees, however, became my sanctuary, my temple. The forest became my temple.
Mm.
Um, I talked to God, I began to talk to God more as well. If, at first it was like, I don't want to feel this. Please help me. I want to be happy. And then it eventually turned into, I don't want to be here. There's something wrong with me. Please take me. Was the language that I was using. And so the ocean and the forest was my connection.
Mm.
I could talk to them, like I felt like I could talk to the trees and talk to the water and talk to nature, but I wasn't hearing anything back. Um, but I could feel their presence, and I could feel that they were helping me. Um, However, I would take my mountain bike. I got a mountain bike, and I would go there every day, even during the school week, and just to get away. It wasn't that far. The school's actually built right into the forest, one of the forests there. So yeah, so I remember, so that was the first year, and then moving into the second year, I started to date somebody, and um I really loved her. She was great. It was like, but it felt like it was, cathartic love. It was like she's the one to take me out of this depression, out of the state. And I tried it as, even though there were moments of joy, I felt like I was depending on her for that. And yeah, so I ended up actually breaking up with her because I didn't feel good about myself to continue or to have good communication with her, or just, I was 20 years old, I was 19 years old. And then after that I just began to spiral. And I was like, now I'm talking to God saying, I don't want to be here. This is too hard. I've ended up flunked philosophy. I thought I was like the master philosopher. I thought I had all these great ideas. And so I, yeah. So, and then the other part too, I'll mention, was that theater was also became something that helped me express myself. So I had a um, professor who was incredibly creative and very sensitive, and he just kind of pulled me in under his wing, and I started acting, and so that helped as well. But it was still that this depression was like overbearing. It was greater than the connection to nature. It was greater than um, you know any gratitude that I might have for the people around me. And I didn't know how to seek help. I thought about killing myself, but I thought also that that would hurt and that would be hard, and I wouldn't know how to do that. And I didn't. Yeah, it was like I just knew that I didn't want to be here, and I continued to say, please take me, God, please take me. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. So that was my new mantra. I know it's I shouldn't be laughing, but it's like, like the power of words is what ended up happening.
Yeah.
And and so the last semester of my second year at college, it was horrible. I was, friends that I had just didn't want to be with me. Of course, nobody wants to really be around a depressed person, someone that's depressed all the time, which is understandable. I felt more and more alone. My dad was telling me I better find a job or he's going to take me out of school, because he was paying out of state tuition, you know, and so I was like, okay, screw this, just take me, I just said that. I ended the semester. I started to look for a job. I was lost. I was scattered. I was lost. I was depressed. And then there was
So
one,
I want to just
yeah,
like interject here because what I'm sensing and feeling is from you is, you're speaking of this, and because it was so long ago and because there was so much healing, it's just kind of coming out like matter of fact. And I just want to say, like, we're about the same age, and what I know from my experience and now on this side of that part of life, that you weren't actually alone. And there were so many people, myself included, that felt that way. I mean, later on, I did actually try to take my life. But up until that point, it was, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be on this planet. And I actually couldn't ever express that to anyone. And when I did get brave and express it to my family, they did see it as a cry for help, but they didn't help me in the way I needed, right? They called the police and put me on a watch. And I just want to like highlight that, I think so many of us that, grew up in our generation had similar experiences. And you mentioned that nobody wants to hang out with a depressed person. And so your friends, didn't want to be around you. But I would probably go as far to say that we were all feeling the same thing. We were all depressed. And some of us just were better at not showing it. And I'm curious how that lands for you, because I know when we're healed and we talk about something, it just kind of comes out. But really, if we like tune into the depth of what that felt like, it can be very, very
Right.
in those spaces.
Yeah, so it's like pulling up the past, and that's, and it's true. I've told the story so many times. It's I don't have an intention to make it sound like it's just a thing that happened to me,
Mhm.
but it's true. I mean, it's it and I know it's not just our generation, but it is true that
Right. Right.
it's you feel alone. I mean, even I have memories walking through campus and seeing people's heads, hanging, and I could feel that they were depressed. At least that's what I thought or felt at the time.
And you're
Um,
right, it's not just our generation, which is why I think it's so important to bring that attention to it, because I do believe that there are people now who have that same feeling or who experience something similar. And again, I just want to say thank you for being so vulnerable and so open and sharing that, because we don't actually have to feel alone, because we're not. But
yeah,
it can absolutely feel like we're alone in experiences like this.
yeah, because when you're in that place, then it, at least from my experience, it's like, what is somebody going to think of me if I express this? What's going to happen to me? Am I going to feel worse about myself? Am I going to feel, that there really is something wrong with me? Am I going to have that feeling or that idea reinforced by somebody else?
Yeah. And
Um,
those are all valid, because for those who aren't aware of depression or how to feel and they're numbing their own emotions, that could actually be the reaction you get. It was the reaction I got when I did get brave and shared, that I was weird.
yeah,
There was something wrong with me. I needed to go, get help because I was mentally ill, which actually
yeah,
wasn't the case.
yeah, yeah. Right. So I know there's different diagnoses out there, levels of depression or whatever. And, I mean, we can talk about that too, how to receive help and stuff like that. But like you had said back then, there wasn't really any avenues for us or to even understand what we were going through,
Even
right? I
going to
mean,
therapy was like you were looked at as weird, or it wasn't as accepted as it is today.
yeah, correct. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I didn't mean to sidetrack, so let's
No, no,
get
no. I
back to
think it's important to
your
talk about.
journey.
No, no, no. I think it's an important subject to talk about. So, yeah, there was a defining moment. It was in May 1997. I was basically walking my bike through Arcata, the town there, and I just looked up and said, "I've had it. Please take me. I don't want to be here anymore." And it was within that week, maybe 4 days, 3 days, something like that, is when I had my near-death experience. So, you want me to talk about that or
Yes,
now or okay.
absolutely.
So yeah, so I was it was in the morning time. I was on my mountain bike. Um, um, Helmets weren't really popular back then. I didn't think they were cool unless you were doing competitive, and I wasn't doing competitive, so I didn't have a helmet. Um, and I liked the breeze on my head, and so the fog was coming out. I don't know what time it was, maybe 9 o'clock in the morning or so. And so I just left the house and started to head towards Arcata Community Forest, is what it was called. And there was a fog coming through. It was a beautiful morning. The sun was coming through. And so I was probably in the forest for 2 hours or so, maybe. And then I knew everywhere I was going. I didn't go anywhere different. I knew all the trails. I knew where the jumps were. And so I started to head back home towards town, and heading back home was going down a hill through the forest. That's one of the paths. So I just started to go home. I took the jumps, and then it was the last jump that I took, and just as I came around the corner and started to go on it, I noticed that it was built up. Somebody had actually really built it up. Like, it was a big jump already, but somebody had built it up like vertically, like they had spent time packing the dirt and really making it a big jump. But it was too late because I didn't know, how my body was used to how it was basically, and then it was a surprise when I hit it. And as soon as I hit it, I'm like, I'm screwed. I knew I was screwed. I hit it, and it was really vertical, and I flew, I don't know how many feet. I flew really far, and I came down on my front tire first, which is not what anybody wants to do. And I felt my head hit, and then I felt my body roll with the bike, and it was my neck, and then my back, and it was my back like thumped on the ground, on the dirt there. And I was basically out, like out meaning, knocked out, like somebody would knock anybody out. And then it was, I don't know the time, how long it took, but I didn't wake up in my body initially. I was in I was above the redwood trees, and it was me, not like me in this body, but it was just an awareness of me, of maybe my spirit or maybe my soul. I don't know exactly what that is, but it was an awareness of me, hanging above the trees, and just this open space and this peace, this undeniable peace that was moving through me, that was, I guess you could say, moving through me, or was me. I don't know, but there was just this it was just like this, and I keep breathing because it's just like this, from everything that happened before, it was just like this total peace washed over me. And I noticed that I was above the trees, just above, a little bit above the trees and around them. And it was almost like my senses got really heightened, Chrissy. It wasn't like, you know, touch or taste or smell, but it was that, but it was like um really, really sensitive, almost like everything was happening at the same time, and yet I could really tune into different things. For example, I did hear a dog bark, and there was, I don't know if it was in the forest, it could have been really far away, but it felt like it was like right in my ear. I could hear birds.
Mhm.
um, I could feel the wind moving through this part of me. I could actually feel the wind, like not like touching the skin, but like going all through me, which is my mic. And I could sense and feel the ocean and hear the ocean as if it was right there. It's 5 miles away, 10 miles away. I could see the little crystals, the water crystals on the needles of the redwood, so I could like micro focus in on the needles of the redwoods.
Mhm.
And so I felt very, it was like a nature experience, I guess you could say. That was the experience I was having. I wasn't talking to God. I wasn't seeing any beings. I was with beings.
Did you have a cognitive understanding or awareness of what was happening at this point? Like, did you realize that you had popped out of your body, or were you just taking in
No.
all the senses?
I I had an awareness, or the awareness was the familiarity of who I was. It was just like, oh, this is me. I wasn't at that moments, I wasn't thinking about, oh, I popped out of my body, what happened. So that was the, yeah. Is that your question?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many curiosities around this. So, like, that moment for you, or those moments for you, that what I heard you just say is that, this is me, and it felt like you. So, was there surprise or like shock that you were above the trees and that you could hear all these things and see the tiniest molecules of water? Was that shocking to you, or was that just like, oh, because you mentioned
It
familiarity?
was right. So yeah, it was more like there was like an awe to it, but it was more like home, like, oh, this is how it should be. That was the feeling, this is. And then, which brings me to the next part of your question. That's when I looked down and actually saw my physical body and on the ground with the bike all bent out of shape, and like, I'm like, that's not me. It was like, oh, that's that part that was depressed going to college over there. That's not me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the familiarity was, it wasn't like, oh yeah, of course the ocean, and it wasn't like that. It was like, yeah, like I was taking it in. It was amazing, but it was also at the same time like, oh, this is how it is. This is how it should be.
Yeah.
So I saw my body, and I was like, oh, um I wasn't thinking logically. This wasn't a logical process, and I don't have any idea what the time frame was.
Mhm.
And then I heard a voice. I don't know if it was my soul or my spirit. It could have been, or it could have been God. Um, for a while, I thought it was just a bigger part of me. I don't really know what it was. It says, "Do you want to go further, or do you want to go back?" And my answer was immediate. I don't want to die. And as soon as I said that, I was back in my body, not fully conscious, just opening my eyes, noticing that it was like slow, and then it got really intense, the pain in my body where I was feeling I couldn't move. I could, it's like you get your breath knocked out of you. It's like that was happening. So it was like I got slammed back into my body, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't, I had to like effort myself to breathe. I
Mhm.
could feel the pain. I mean, it just stabbing electrical muscular pain, and I just couldn't move. And so, and then I began to open my eyes. It was almost like I didn't want to open my eyes, but I did. And that's when I saw fairies, nature spirits, um, around me. That's when I saw them, um, bringing joy and trying to bring lightness to the situation, telling them it's okay. They were coming down from the trees. I heard little giggles. Um, they would like fly around me, and then they would take off and swoop down, um, and I don't know how many there were. There were a lot of them, but they were there like, okay, it's okay. It's almost like, it was almost like, when thinking back at it now, like, oh, you made the right decision. Life is supposed to be fun. Life is supposed to be happy.
Yeah.
You're supposed to enjoy your life. And so I saw that, and then I began to hear, and that was continuing to happen. And then I began to hear uh, ringing sound tones, like deep, almost like a deep Tibetan singing bowl.
Mm.
And I knew it was the trees. I just instantly knew it was the trees, sending me like a healing, and I could feel that. And so then again, there's always like some kind of duality happening in my life. So even though I was feeling and experiencing this, I was also experiencing the pain. And it's like I didn't want to feel that pain. So it's like something happened in my brain, and I shut myself off again. Um, and then sometime later, I woke up in the emergency room, at the community hospital there. So, um, yeah, so I can keep talking. Like I woke up, I remember I I woke up kind of numb and kind of in pain, and I think it's because they were giving me drugs. And actually, I know it's because they were giving me painkillers. And my memory was very little. The doctor was asking me, simple questions like, "Where do you live? Do you go to school? What's your name?" And I didn't know any of those things. And then he asked me, "Do you know anybody in town? You can give me a phone number." And I did blurt out a phone number. It was like spirit speaking through me, blurting out this number. And it was a dear family friends of my parents that um, my dad used to teach with in Salinas years ago. And then they ended up being friends, the whole family. So they came and got me, and they took care of me until my mom came and we flew out of there. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So just going back a little bit, I don't remember from the time I was knocked out until I got into the hospital.
Mhm.
I don't know who found me either. Um, I tried to find
That
that
was
information out.
never revealed to you who found you?
Yeah, yeah. It's not actually in the hospital report either. It was never like I
Wow.
called them and I asked them like, well, who who's this person, because I wanted to call and thank them for calling 911, and they said we don't have a 911 record, we don't have any record of anybody calling in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, that could have been part of the magic that was happening. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, there were really angels with you that day, or the fairies. Like
yeah,
that's pretty amazing. I'm curious about a couple of things. You said that you had saw the fairies and nature spirits. So, in addition to the fairies, was there anything else that was present while you were having that experience, or were you just aware of fairies around you?
yeah. So just referring to the fairies as nature spirits.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
no, there isn't anything, just not just, but the trees as well,
Mhm.
um that were there.
Yeah.
And yeah, which was a lot already in itself.
And
Yeah,
okay, so I'm curious about something else because I have interviewed quite a few near-death experiencers and researchers of near-death experiences. And I know that it's pretty common for those in their near-death experience to be met with beings or ascended masters that either match their faith or that bring them comfort. So
yeah,
in when you were sharing about your journey, you were mentioning that when you were younger you could see the fairies when you were talking to the trees before you moved to Washington. Was Do you think that the fairies were there because of that? Like, you mentioned nature had come back to you around 18 years old. Was the fairy realm, was that something that had come back to you as well, like leading up to your NDE, or was that like a reconnection with the nature spirits?
yeah. So before, it was like when I was a kid, I had that connection. I remember that connection, remember seeing them and talking to them and stuff like that. And then when I was older, before, it was the I didn't have that, right? But what did happen actually, when that young woman that I was in love with, um before my NDE, when I was still in college,
Mhm.
I did have an experience. I was laying on her bed. She was, I believe, in the other room doing homework, and my eyes were closed and my heart was just open. I was in love. I was just felt really open. And I remember seeing them in my vision. But it wasn't like a vision I was having. It was like closing my eyes and having an experience like they were right there. So I could see them like in clarity floating around me in
Mhm.
that vision, as the redwood fairies.
Yeah.
So so that was an experience I had. So it wasn't like after I had that, it was like, oh yeah, of course fairies exist, but it wasn't like um I tried to see them. Maybe I would go out and talk to them like, I know you're out here,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like and also it wasn't like I dismissed that. Like that was like, oh wow, that was really cool.
Mhm.
Um, so when I did see them when I was on the ground, it was like I knew that it was almost like a confirmation. Like I knew that they were real. I knew that they existed, and I knew that they were, you know, wanted to be a part of my life somehow, or they recognized who I really was. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just getting that familiarity, and I'm curious because in your whole journey, it was not easy for you. You felt alone and you couldn't talk about your depression really with anyone. And so I'm curious about after your NDE. So you don't know who it was who found you. You just woke up in a hospital, spit out a number for a family friend. And so you were able to, reconnect with your family and people that cared about you. I'm curious about the process after that. So you mentioned that you really didn't have, the doctors were asking you questions. You couldn't answer these questions. You couldn't remember. I'm curious about like that transition, how long that took, and then also, were you able to talk about this to anyone at the time that it
Hmm.
happened? I know you talk about it now, but were you able
Yeah.
to then?
No. I didn't feel comfortable talking to anybody about it. I didn't feel it felt just too raw what was happening, and also I was in a lot of pain. So it wasn't like I wanted to work on that pain in my body. And so what happened was I went to a neurologist when I went back to Washington. He just basically said, I don't know how to help you. Here's a bunch of pills. And I said, I'm not going to do that. So I was referred to a network chiropractor who began to really help me heal my body. And he was a healer. He still is.
Mhm.
And so I saw the changes and felt the changes really quickly, how much my body actually can see that, how much my body can actually heal itself. As that was happening, as I was healing my body, all that depression too. So so it was an experience basically of me healing my body, and it took me about 9 months before I could walk around again without feeling so much pain. But I was also experiencing a lot of emotions, a lot of unworthiness, a lot of not wanting to be here. There was some feelings of, why did I come back? So there was a lot of internal processing happening at the same time. Um, and I don't really know what there was like a turning point, but I think it was really when I was seeing that this man, how he was helping me, that I wanted to start doing the same thing. I wanted to help other people in a similar way, whether that was be a healer or body worker or to help people. Um, and so that kind of took me on my path of healing. And I mean, there's so much in between, Chrissy, as far as like, what happened then, and then what's happened today, 25, 26 years ago. But that really became part of what I wanted to do is help people. And so I ended up going to massage school. I had my own practice for years, and then I learned quantum healing from that spiritual teacher. And I began my own practice. So um, is that what your question was? Because yeah, so there's that, and then I felt like lots of heat coming through my hands, and I've helped people with hands-on healing. I've done that. I've never Reiki training or anything like that. So I think yeah, I mean, and then also just really like being in tune, having my inner vision open up, um, hearing spirit more. I think those are gifts that came slowly after time. They didn't happen right then and there or right after the years following. They've happened over time. It's been a long process.
Mhm.
Um, so maybe there's a difference there with other people. I know some stories, but I don't know a lot of stories of people's experiences. But I'm no more special than anybody else. I think we all have gifts. I think we're all special. I think we're all children of the divine, of God. And we all have our unique gifts to give to this world.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I know that 26 years ago, 25 years ago, in our other two interviews, I know you've been up to a lot of different things with offering courses, with writing a book, and just, being of service to help people in their journeys. I'm curious if you would talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you have either accomplished or some of the stuff that you're up to now.
sure. So for years I've been doing the quantum type healing, where I talk to people over Zoom and I do healing. And I'm moving away from that because I noticed that it's not so much people want energy, my experience, at least the people that are coming to me. It's more so they want um, guidance or mentoring or coaching. So what I notice, Chrissy, is that people want more guidance as far as how to move from where they are if they don't like where their life is to how they can get there. So that's why I switched from doing I don't know if this is the right platform to discuss, the coaching, but this is, basically what we do together is dual coaching now. And that has to do with, and we come from a place of our experience, and we come from a place of not only years of experience but also having a perspective of both the masculine aspect and the feminine aspect. So for people that want to experience dual coaching, this can be incredibly beneficial for any aspect of their life, which tends to be mostly relationships. And so I call it life mastery or coaching is because we are in a relationship with anything and everything in our life, and that's where we need to bring balance back into, is from people that are coming to us. So that could be, for example, a mother and a daughter, or it could be a business partnership, or it could be somebody wanting a better relationship with themselves, or it could be a relationship with finances and with money. It could be a relationship with their body. And so that is the focus right now, is to guide people in such a way that really has to do with um, what we've experienced and our knowledge and wisdom and how we can help people in those areas.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And how do people get a hold of you, Tyler?
So our website is, people can reach me at mysticsplayground.com, and they just need to scroll down to the bottom of the page where it says Life Mastery Coaching, and that's where we focus with the dual coaching on specifically mastering any area of relationship.
Yes. And the lovely wind in Hawaii is causing there to be a little bit of turbulence. So I'm just going to let you know that that link will be in the description of the show. It's actually in the description of all of my episodes. And if you didn't hear it clearly the first time, it's mysticsplayground.com. So thank you so much, Tyler. We made it just in time for the storm that's rolling through. We got through all the technical stuff. It's been such an honor and such a pleasure. I'm so excited that I finally got to interview you about your near-death experience. I have never had that opportunity before, and it was better than I could have imagined. So thank you again for sharing your heart and your story and your experience with the world. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Chrissy.
I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.